I'm here because I don't know how else to untangle what's happening in my marriage. I, 34M, honestly thought Mara, 32F, and I were rock solid. For 8 years, we built a rhythm that felt safe: Sunday brunch with pancakes and too much syrup, lazy afternoons in thrift store chairs, playlists traded on rainy nights. Those little rituals made the world outside feel manageable. Somewhere in the past few months, the edges of that comfort started to fray. Mara changed in ways that were hard to pin down at first: little sighs when I spoke, quick looks at her phone mid-conversation, new clothes that didn't match the woman I knew. She'd come home with a scent I didn't recognize, something sharp and expensive. When I teased her about her mystery perfume, she snapped, "Maybe I just want to smell nice without it being about you." Then came the yoga. She'd always mocked yoga as stretching with candles, but suddenly it was the highlight of her week. The classes grew longer, and she'd arrive home flushed, hair slightly mussed, eyes glittering in a way that didn't look like a workout glow. Once, I leaned in for a kiss and caught the faint tang of wine. I tried to chalk it up to stress: her marketing job has been brutal lately, and we're still grieving my dad. But there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. She'd become defensive about her phone, turning the screen away if I walked by. If I asked a harmless question like, "Everything okay?" she'd shoot back, "Daniel, stop interrogating me." The warmth we'd built over years felt like it was slipping through my fingers, replaced by a version of Mara who didn't seem to care if I noticed she was pulling away. And for the first time since we met, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't name, and she was already on the other side. I wish I could tell you there was one single lightning bolt moment, but the truth crept in sideways. It started with a Saturday she swore she was running late for yoga. Her mat was tucked under her arm, but she'd put on a silk blouse instead of a tank top, skinny jeans instead of leggings. I laughed, trying to keep it light. "That's some fancy stretching gear." She rolled her eyes, muttered something about a coffee after class, and bolted. That planted a seed I couldn't shake. The next week, I offered to drive her. She flatly refused, saying parking was impossible. When she left, I decided to take a walk downtown, just to clear my head. Near the art district, I spotted her car parked half a block from a converted warehouse that doubled as a gallery and studio space. Through the big windows, I saw her standing close to a guy with dark hair pulled into a messy knot, a camera strap slung over his shoulder. He had his hand on her elbow as he showed her something on the screen. I froze. The air around me felt heavy, like static before a storm. She laughed, not the polite laugh I get, but something freer, a little reckless. That night I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe she'd just stopped by to see an exhibit. But the next day I found a folded receipt in the laundry: 2 glasses of Malbec, a charcuterie board, time-stamped exactly when she'd claimed she was in a restorative pose. My stomach knotted. I felt stupid, like I'd been playing house while she lived a secret life a few streets away. I wasn't ready to confront her yet, but the seed had become a tree with roots tearing up everything solid in my chest. I couldn't keep circling that knot in my chest anymore, so I decided to ask her straight out. It was a Tuesday evening, rain tapping against the kitchen window. Mara came in late, smelling faintly of wine and something woody, not the lavender body mist she used to wear. She tossed her bag on the counter and started scrolling her phone before even looking at me. Me, "Can we talk for a minute?" Her, without looking up, "About what now, Daniel?" "I'm exhausted." My hands were trembling as I laid the receipt on the table, the one from the wine bar. "This, I found it in your jeans. You said you were at yoga." She blinked, then gave this sharp little laugh. "Wow, you're rifling through my pockets now. That's creepy." I stayed quiet, waiting. Her face tightened, the way it does when she's about to spin a story. "Fine," she huffed. "Julian is just a photographer I met at the gallery. He's helping me reconnect with my creative side. God forbid I have a hobby without you turning it into an affair." But she wouldn't meet my eyes. I pushed. "Are you sleeping with him?" Her chair scraped back. "That's insulting," she snapped. "Do you even hear yourself?" I needed a drink after class, and he happened to be there. "Not everything is about you, Daniel." Her voice got louder, brittle at the edges. She accused me of being jealous, controlling, like my dad. It felt like she was throwing smoke bombs, hoping I'd lose sight of the question. I wanted to believe her, but the way her hands shook as she grabbed her phone told me there was more she wasn't saying. That night, she slept facing the wall, phone tucked under her pillow like a secret she wasn't ready to give up. And I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the woman I married had already left, and only the shell was sharing my bed. That night after the confrontation, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every word she'd said, and every word she hadn't. Her phone glowing faintly beneath the pillow felt like a lighthouse for secrets I wasn't allowed to see. By morning, Mara was breezy, humming while she made coffee, as if the argument had been a dream. She kissed my cheek on her way out the door and said, "Try not to overthink everything, okay?" The casualness cut deeper than any confession would have. Over the next week, I felt like I was living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. She'd come home late, smelling like paint thinner and wine, claiming she'd stayed behind at class to help a friend stretch. Her stories got sloppy. One day she said she'd been at hot yoga, the next she swore it was a candlelit meditation session. Meanwhile, I was unraveling. My appetite disappeared, food tasted like cardboard. At work, I'd open spreadsheets and find myself staring at them for minutes, not absorbing a thing. Even my friends noticed. One asked if I was sick. I laughed it off, but inside I felt like someone had scooped out my insides and left a hollow shell behind. I started doubting my own instincts, wondering if I'd become paranoid or needy. But every time I tried to trust her words, a new detail would surface, a smudge of crimson paint on her wrist, a faint male voice on speakerphone that she'd hurried to mute, a second wine receipt crumpled in her tote bag. One evening, I overheard her giggling in the hallway. She caught me watching, shot me a look sharp enough to draw blood, and said, "Can you not lurk like a weirdo?" Then she vanished into the bedroom and closed the door, still whispering into her phone. I felt humiliation, rage, and a heavy kind of grief all at once. It wasn't just about Julian anymore, it was the realization that she didn't respect me enough to even hide the lies properly. I'd built my life around someone who was tearing it apart in slow motion, and somehow making it look like my fault. That night, alone in the kitchen with a cold cup of coffee, I knew something had to give. By the time a few more weeks rolled past, I felt like I was living in a house that wasn't really mine anymore. Mara drifted through the rooms with her phone pressed to her ear, tossing half-answers over her shoulder if I asked where she was going. I'd catch fragments, studio, canvas, just drinks, relax, but the rest was a fog she kept me out of. I knew I couldn't survive much longer pacing that fog. I started small, writing everything down. Dates, receipts, times she left, even the way her voice lifted when she said his name by accident. She'd called him Jules once, then tried to laugh it off as a slip about an old college friend. Seeing the facts in ink steadied me. I wasn't crazy. Something real was happening behind my back. Then came the night that tipped me over. She told me she was going to an evening yin yoga session, but when I checked the studio schedule online, there wasn't a single class after 6 p.m. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone. I didn't storm after her. Instead, I sat in the quiet living room, lights off, and thought about the man I'd become in the shadow of her lies, tense, sleepless, shrinking. I remembered who I'd been before, someone who liked to laugh, who made plans, who built a life because he believed it could be good. I missed that version of myself more than I missed the woman Mara used to be. So I made a choice, no more drifting. I booked an appointment with a therapist the next morning. I needed someone to help me untangle this mess inside my head. I also called a lawyer friend, not to file anything yet, but to understand what separating would look like if it came to that. Just making those calls felt like pulling air into lungs that had been underwater. That weekend I asked Mara to sit down with me. I set my phone on the table, voice steady even though my pulse was hammering. I don't know what story you're living in anymore, I said, but I can't stay in a marriage where I'm the only one showing up. Either we talk honestly, or we admit this is over. She looked startled, then annoyed, as if I'd interrupted some private screenplay she was acting out. She muttered about me being dramatic, but I didn't rise to it. For the first time in months, I felt anchored, not because of her but because I was finally standing up for myself. Whether she chose to come clean or walk away, I knew I'd taken the first step back toward the man I wanted to be, a man who didn't settle for half-truths and crumbs of affection. When Mara finally agreed to talk, it wasn't the calm, adult conversation I had imagined after rehearsing my lines in the mirror. She slouched into the kitchen chair, arms folded, nails tapping the table like she was already bored. Mara, Daniel, you're turning this into a melodrama. People get busy, they make new friends. That doesn't mean they're cheating. Me, busy doesn't leave wine receipts hidden in jeans or call another man in whispers. Her eyes flashed, irritation, not guilt. She tossed her hair, gave a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Mara, you're ridiculous. Julian is just helping me with some photography stuff. He thinks I have an eye. It's nice to feel seen. That last word hit me like a stone. I pushed the journal of dates and notes across the table. She skimmed a page, her jaw tightening. Mara, you've been tracking me? That's controlling, Daniel. Me, no, it's surviving in a marriage where I don't know what's real anymore. For a heartbeat, something flickered in her expression, guilt or panic, I couldn't tell. Then she sighed theatrically, as if I'd cornered her into admitting to stealing a cookie, not dismantling our vows. Mara, fine. We kissed. Once. Maybe twice. It wasn't serious, just a distraction. The room spun. All those nights I'd doubted myself, every twist in my gut, they hadn't been paranoia, they'd been my instincts screaming the truth. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. You lied to my face, I said quietly. Over and over. And you made me feel crazy for noticing. That landed harder than anything else. She didn't have a comeback for a moment, she just stared at the table. Then, almost too casually, she muttered. Mara, maybe we both got lazy. Maybe I needed excitement. Julian was just there. I felt something settle inside me, not calm, but clarity. Her betrayal wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. She had chosen to feed herself on secrets while letting me starve on scraps of half-truths. I stood up, voice steady despite the storm inside. I don't know yet if I'm leaving or fighting for this. But I won't live like this anymore. You need to decide if you're in this marriage, fully. And if not, I'll be the one to walk. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. She looked small for a moment, caught between defiance and something she didn't dare name. That night I slept in the guest room, door shut, journal on the nightstand. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a boundary, and maybe a way forward, even if it meant walking away. The morning after that kitchen showdown, the house felt like a museum of two people who used to know how to breathe around each other. Mara moved quietly, no humming, no perfumed cloud. She didn't look at me as she poured coffee, just slid the mug across the counter like a waiter at a diner. I took it but didn't drink. My appetite had been replaced by a low thrum of adrenaline. I watched her thumb fly across her phone, screen angled away. Me, are you texting him? Mara, flat, Daniel, not everything is about Julian. I'm talking to a friend from work. I almost laughed, the same line she'd used a dozen times. It wasn't even clever anymore, just muscle memory for lying. That afternoon, I drove to the park near the gallery, sat in my car, and let myself cry for the first time since this started. I wasn't just mourning the affair, I was mourning the ease we used to have. I missed the way she'd shove a pancake at me on Sundays, how we'd fight over music in the car, the way she'd grab my arm during scary movies. But mixed with grief was a quiet steel. I realized I was done shrinking to fit inside her secrets. I called my therapist, booked an extra session, and spent an hour spilling everything, the wine receipts, the late nights, the kiss she'd finally admitted. Saying it out loud, with someone neutral listening, made it solid. It wasn't a story I'd invented to torture myself. That weekend, I told Mara I needed space. I didn't pack a bag, but I claimed the guest room for real this time. She bristled, saying I was punishing her. I calmly said I wasn't, I just couldn't heal in the same bed where she texted another man under the covers. She tried to lure me back with small gestures, cooking my favorite pasta, suggesting we watch our old comfort show. But I noticed she never once apologized beyond that grudging, "we kissed" line. No promise to stop seeing him, no plan to fix anything. It was as if she expected me to let the storm blow over so she could go back to juggling us both. I knew then the next stage wasn't about coaxing her into clarity. It was about me deciding what I needed, and what I deserved, if I was going to stay married or start over alone. By the time a few more days crawled past, I knew I couldn't just drift in limbo. The guest room was starting to feel like a waiting room for a life I hadn't chosen. I sat down one evening with a notebook and began to list what I needed if this marriage had any chance. 1. She cut off contact with Julian. 2. Transparency with her phone, social media, everything. 3. Couples therapy, real therapy, not the half-hearted, "let's just be nicer" talks she liked to suggest. 4. A clear acknowledgement that what she'd done was a betrayal, not a momentary distraction. When I presented the list, Mara stared at it like I'd handed her a tax audit. "Mara, this is insane, Daniel. You don't get to police me." "Me, I'm not policing you. I'm giving you the terms for rebuilding trust. Without that, there's nothing left." She leaned back, arms folded, eyes narrowed. For a second I thought she'd storm out, but instead she said, almost lazily, "Mara, Julian's harmless. You're making it into a tragedy." That line, the breezy dismissal, nearly snapped something inside me. I stayed calm, but my voice was ice. "Then you're choosing him over us." Her face tightened. She looked away, fingers tapping her thigh. Finally she muttered, "Mara, fine. I'll tell him it's over." I didn't trust the quickness of her answer, so I pressed, "I need to see the message." Her head whipped back toward me, eyes wide with outrage. "Mara, you don't get to watch me text people." But after a long silence, she typed something, lips pressed thin. She showed me a message, "Can't see you anymore. Need to work on my marriage." I couldn't tell if it was genuine or just theater, but at least it was a line in the sand. That night she hovered by the guest room, asking if I wanted to come back to bed. I shook my head. "Not yet," I said quietly. "Show me this isn't just another lie." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I'd put a stake in the ground, not to control her, but to protect what was left of me. Whether she stepped toward the boundary or walked past, it would tell me everything I needed to know about the future. The days after I laid out those boundaries felt like waiting to see if a bridge would hold or collapse. Mara's reaction swung wildly depending on the hour. One morning she brought me coffee and a plate of toast, acting almost shy as she set it on my desk. That night, she stormed into the guest room, accusing me of treating her like a criminal, because I hadn't moved back into our bed. Her moods were like weather, sometimes bright and almost remorseful, sometimes a cold front rolling through the house. I kept my footing by sticking to my list, no phone secrecy, no contact with Julian, and therapy booked for the next week. A couple of times I caught her slipping. Once, she flipped her phone face down when it buzzed. Another time, she claimed she was running out for groceries but came back without any bags and smelling faintly of cigarette smoke. When I asked, she snapped that she'd met a coworker to vent. I didn't explode, I just said calmly, "If this isn't what you want, tell me. Don't keep us in half-light. That seemed to rattle her more than anger would have. Meanwhile, I was changing too. Therapy helped me find my own voice again. I started jogging after work, texting friends I'd let drift while I was stuck inside our tension. Piece by piece, I felt the fog thinning, even as the marriage stayed on shaky legs. The truth was, we weren't fixing anything yet, we were only testing if there was something left to fix. I could see how heavy my conditions sat on her shoulders, but they were the only path to any future worth having. One quiet evening, Mara sat beside me on the couch, no phone in her hand, eyes fixed on the floor. "I didn't think you'd ever stand up like this," she said softly. "It's different." I wasn't sure if she meant it as a compliment or a warning, but it was the first time she'd acknowledged the shift in power between us. And for the first time since everything cracked open, I believed I might actually get to choose where my life went from here, instead of just surviving hers. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt both fragile and strangely peaceful. Mara was less defensive, but also less vibrant, like someone unsure how to live without a secret to feed. She kept to the boundaries I'd set, no hidden messages, no late-night disappearances, therapy once a week. I wanted to believe that meant progress, but therapy taught me to look beyond gestures. A partner who truly wants to rebuild shows it not just in compliance, but in openness, in warmth, in the willingness to sit with the pain they caused. Mara could follow rules, but she rarely reached for me, rarely owned the choice she'd made. One evening after a long run, I sat on the porch with a glass of water, the sun falling behind the rooftops. For the first time since this began, I wasn't replaying old arguments or inventing hopeful scripts. I was just still. And I knew. I didn't want a marriage built on surveillance and half-truths. I wanted laughter that didn't feel earned by interrogations, trust that didn't need contracts. I deserved a partner who would fight for me the way I'd fought to save us. So I told her, gently but clearly, that I was filing for separation. No shouting, no accusations, just the truth. She cried, angry at first, then quiet. Maybe she hadn't believed I would follow through. The next morning I packed a small bag and left for a friend's place. Walking out the door, I felt a weight lift from my chest. Sadness, yes, but also air. I wasn't leaving just a marriage, I was leaving the man who'd let himself be erased by someone else's lies. If anyone reading this is living in that half-life, doubting your own instincts, waiting for crumbs of honesty, please hear me, you're not crazy. You're not too demanding. You're allowed to want a love that doesn't make you disappear. Take the step toward yourself. Whatever comes next will at least be real.